So, what's your topic today?
I thought we'd look at the difference that the resurrection of Jesus makes to death itself. Well, the first 3 chapters of Genesis, that's the first book in the Bible, the stories of creation and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, form an absolutely superb introduction to the whole biblical narrative, the big story, in the centre of which we find our own story.
Right.
Now, at the end of chapter 3 in Genesis, Adam and Eve are thrown out of the garden, and an angel is put on guard to ensure that they no longer had access to the tree of life.
Right.
So while they were in the garden, they could eat of the fruit of the tree of life, which meant, presumably, that they would not die.
Right.
If that is indeed the case, and I think that it is,
Right.
then death was not part of God's original plan for human beings. So thanks for nothing, Adam and Eve.
I thought, however, there was a devious, deceitful snake involved too.
Well, yes, and he is still deceiving humans. Death has become the last enemy and greatest enemy for us all. And even those attempts which very wealthy human beings make to escape death are entirely futile. So what difference does the resurrection of Jesus make to death itself? Now, the disciples back at the time of Jesus knew several people whom Jesus had raised from the dead. The widow of Nain's son, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, stories all in the Gospels. But they, the disciples, found it impossible to believe, to start with, that Jesus himself had risen. You see, there was something different about the resurrection of Jesus. The disciples recognised him, they knew it was him, and yet he was somehow different. Well, he could walk through walls as if they were not there, for example. So this resurrection, the resurrection of Jesus, was somehow different from the others the disciples had seen.
Yeah, those accounts of Jesus' resurrection are really intriguing, right? And compared with the others you've just described, different. But how do we make sense of them?
Well, I think the key is this. Lazarus, let's use him as an example, lived his life after Jesus raised him, then died as human beings do. Now, had he not died, there would surely be a church in modern day Bethany in Israel where you could go and chat to the old fella for a large fee, of course. However, Jesus did not die again. He is alive. He ascended into heaven, where he still reigns at the right hand of the Father.
I mean, that's what the Bible says.
Yes, that's so. This means that in the battle between Jesus and death, Jesus has won.
Yay!
And death has been defeated. So the last enemy has been overthrown.
Right.
But death is, of course, fighting back, but it has been defeated. Now, let's illustrate this from history if we can. Many historians say that D-Day, the Normandy invasions in 1944, actually signalled the end of World War II, and Hitler was defeated then, when the Allies landed on the beaches. But we know, don't we, there was still a lot of killing and fighting before VE Day a year later in 1945. In the same way, death has been defeated by the resurrection of Jesus, but there is still a lot of, what can we call it, clearing up to be done. It is what it is. People are born, they live, they die. But when death seems to have the upper hand, we can look back at the fact of the resurrection of Jesus.
The fact, Ron?
Well, it wasn't wishful thinking or a hallucination. It happened. Jesus was and is alive. There's plenty of evidence, incidentally, and many people have written books about evidence for the resurrection. So no matter how hard death fights back, the resurrection of Jesus has signalled the defeat of death once and for all. And that final end of death is gloriously described in chapters 20 and 21 of the book of Revelation, the very final book in the Bible. Death makes its entrance in the first book and its exit in the final book. So chapters 20, 21 of the book of Revelation, death will be destroyed and there will be no more pain, no more crying, no more death in God's kingdom. God's original plan that human beings should live forever will be restored.